Chapter 1, Layer 1, Power and Vulnerability. Today, the moment a man connects with a woman is not merely a physical encounter. At that moment, both power and vulnerability emerge simultaneously. Whether he is aware of it or not, a deep inner story, which Carl Jung called the archetype, comes to life during the encounter. In other words, the man is present not only with his body but also with the deepest parts of his soul. At the moment he meets a woman, he experiences both his strongest and most vulnerable sides. For this reason, this experience is both fascinating and confusing for most men. Don't you agree? This contradiction sometimes attracts them and sometimes frightens them, right? Now, let's analyze the depths of these layers together. As you watch this video, think about this. What might actually lie behind a man's desire? Write your thoughts in the comments. Which of these feelings do you think is more dominant? If you are ready, we start with the first layer. This first layer we will dive into is the power and vulnerability layer. For many men, intimacy is still a kind of conquest, a proof, a display of power. But as Jung also said, a person's inner world cannot always be maintained in straight lines. When a man touches a woman, he reveals not only desire but also the power and pain inside him. At that moment, he says, "I am in control," and at the same time, unconsciously whispers, "See me, accept me." This is why intimacy is a place where both confidence and fear come forward at the same time. When this balance is disturbed, a man either becomes overly rigid or steps back emotionally. In Jung's psychology, this is where the shadow comes into play. The shadow is the part of a man's character he does not want to see: shame, fear, feelings of inadequacy. Intimacy is the period when that shadow suddenly comes into the light. So why do some men, who seem so controlling, suddenly withdraw? Because at that moment, they feel a frightening nakedness in their unconscious. They fear, what if I'm not enough? What if she sees my true self? Have you also noticed that sometimes the men who seem the most secure are actually the weakest and most vulnerable? Share your thoughts on this topic in the comments. I'm really curious about what you think. For this reason, intimacy with a man is not only a meeting of bodies but also a meeting of selves. And then, the woman is not just a partner but a mirror through which the man faces his own shadow. The man who looks into that mirror notices both the light and darkness within himself at the same time. For this reason, even a single touch can bring forth emotions suppressed for years. This is not just desire, this is the soul's effort to show itself. If a man is truly present at that moment, he is open not only physically but also spiritually. But if he is afraid, he immediately steps back and avoids this confrontation. And then, a single question keeps circling in the woman's mind: why did he suddenly distance himself? Perhaps the answer is hidden precisely in that vulnerability. Carl Jung says, "A person cannot know himself until he recognizes his shadow." This is exactly what intimacy is. A man tries to stay balanced on the line between desire and fear in front of a woman. And as long as he can stay there, he truly grows. But if he is afraid of that line, he wants to step back. And most of the time, when he runs away, he is actually running from his own personality, from his shadow. Don't you agree? Sometimes, what a person fears the most is their own feelings. Therefore, the first layer, power and vulnerability, reminds us of this. Intimacy is not just a display of power for a man. In fact, it is the courage to allow the most vulnerable part of himself to be seen. If he can do this, real connection begins there. And that connection transforms both body and soul. Here is the main point: intimacy is not a performance, but a state of awareness. And think about it, perhaps our strongest moments are when we are most vulnerable. I think this topic is worth discussing, don't you? If you've made it this far, it means you enjoy these kinds of deep psychological narratives. Then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Because soon we will move to the second layer, validation. There, we will discuss why a man focuses so much on a woman's reaction. And what he is actually after. If you are ready, let's continue. Chapter 2, Layer 2, Validation. If the first layer I just explained is a mix of power and vulnerability, the second layer is entirely about the psychology of validation. For many men, entering a woman's body is, on an unconscious level, a kind of proof of a "I am valuable" psychology. When this happens, it is a moment when he feels chosen, desired, and deemed sufficient. And that feeling is often stronger than words. For this reason, intimacy for a man is not only about desire, but also an experience where his existence is validated. Have you noticed why some men give so much importance to this stage? Write in the comments, where do you think this need for validation comes from? However, there is a paradox in this, which Carl Jung emphasized. If a man feels valuable only during this stage, that validation is never satisfying. Because every validation that does not come from within is temporary. It ends in that moment, calmness returns, and that small voice inside speaks again, "Was I enough?" That voice is the old familiar fear whispering from his shadow. And this fear sometimes guides a man for years. Do you think that nowadays people might sometimes be seeking validation while thinking it is love? This is exactly why a man pays so much attention to his partner's reactions. He notices differences in breathing, warmth in the tone of voice, the relaxation in her eyes. All of these unconsciously turn into a signal, "I am enough." But if that warmth is not there, or if the woman is distant, calm, or distracted, the man is shaken inside. He may suddenly feel like he is failing. Yet the issue is not satisfaction, it is being seen. Many men do not know this, but what they are actually seeking is not validation, but the need to be seen. Do you agree with Carl Jung on this? Do you think being truly seen is more important than being liked? According to Carl Jung, a man's desire is often not a conscious choice. What guides the man is the fear of inadequacy he carries in his shadow. The feeling inside, the lover archetype, wants validation. Strength, the hero, wants to win. But the inner voice, the shadow, always whispers, "What if I am not enough?" This is why women's emotional reactions are, for a man, not just pleasure but a mirror. In the mirror, the man sees both his pride and his fear. And no matter how much he runs, that reflection stays with him. For some men, this search for validation gets stuck in a cycle. Every new relationship, every new moment of intimacy, becomes a repetition of the question, "Am I enough?" It moves from one woman to another, but the answer never fully comes. Because, as Carl Jung also said, what is not made conscious appears in our life as fate. In other words, a man who cannot face his shadow finds himself repeatedly in the same story. Every time he says, "This time it will be different," but the outcome does not change. What do you think could be the way to break this cycle? Share your ideas in the comments, because there are very different experiences on this. For women, this situation can sometimes be confusing. Why are my reactions so important to him, she might think. Or she may wonder, why does he sometimes distance himself, sometimes get overly close? In reality, at that stage, the man is not only seeking pleasure, he is seeking validation of his existence. And this is a need he cannot consciously understand. The woman's body, voice, gaze, all of these speak to his unconscious. Even a single touch can turn into the message, "Yes, you are enough." But when the woman stays silent or appears indifferent, the man may feel this as rejection. Yet most of the time, it is not even personal. But the shadow does not think that way. The shadow immediately whispers, "See, she didn't like you." At this point, there is an important awareness for women. Yes, the man's search for validation is real, but this burden should not be carried by the woman. A woman's purpose is not to carry the man's self-confidence, but to provide space for him to confront his true self. By staying true to her own feelings, she responds authentically. Because authenticity is the strongest form of healing. And you can understand someone without giving them validation. Sometimes, just being there is enough. Carl Jung teaches us an important freedom at this point. Seeking validation is normal, but becoming dependent on it makes us prisoners. True intimacy goes beyond the question, am I enough? There, it is no longer just two people, but two souls. And validation naturally exists there, it is not sought, it is experienced. When a man decides to accept his shadow, every relationship no longer becomes a proof. Then he can rest, then it can simply be a connection. And this frees both the woman and the man. Have you ever felt this? In real connection, the search for proof disappears. Perhaps the most peaceful moments come then. The second layer, the psychology of validation, teaches us this. If intimacy is lived only to answer the question, am I valuable? It eventually becomes painful. But if two people can genuinely say to each other, I am here. Validation comes naturally. Then every touch becomes not a competition but a sharing. And even every silence carries trust. Then, both the woman and the man go beyond being enough. Together, they become whole. What do you think? What is a man truly seeking, pleasure or to be seen? Let's meet in the comments, I want to hear your thoughts. If this chapter also resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Because soon we will move to the third layer, breaking walls and biological bond. There, we will discuss how both science and Carl Jung meet at the same point. If you are ready, let's continue. Chapter 3. Layer 3, Breaking Walls, Biological Bond. When we look over human history for centuries, men have always oscillated between two identities, the wanderer and the returner. On one hand, they want to explore the world, on the other hand, they always feel the need to return to the same place, the same harbor. For this reason, in ancient works, men always fight, conquer, but in the end find peace by returning to a woman's arms. Just like Odysseus returning to Penelope, or Andromache reaching the patience of her waiting. Don't you think these stories actually describe men's deep inner longing? Modern science today says that this state of return has not only an emotional but also a biological layer. The male body secretes oxytocin and dopamine during intimacy. These hormones are actually the same as the bond formed between a mother and her baby. In other words, during this period, a man is not only experiencing desire but also bonding. So even if he says, it was just one night, his body does not forget. Because the body remembers where it found peace. Don't you think that sometimes the people we cannot forget remain not only in our hearts but also in our bodies? But Carl Jung would not explain this solely with chemistry. He used to say that intimacy is an unconscious union. It is the moment when a man meets the feminine side he has suppressed within himself, the anima. In other words, when a man approaches a woman, he is actually searching for the lost half of his own soul. For this reason, some experiences are unforgettable, some touches leave a mark. That period is the time when two souls, not just two bodies, intersect. In consciousness, it seems only physical, but the unconscious says, this is you. And at that moment, the man sees the reflection of his wholeness within the woman. That is why some relationships defy logic, because they are engraved in the spiritual memory. Have you ever experienced such a bond? Share in the comments, I would like to know. According to Carl Jung, this event is one of the oldest archetypes in the collective unconscious. The union archetype. In other words, the human soul's desire to be whole. For this reason, some men cannot forget a woman. Because not only the body but also the unconscious has formed that bond. And that bond is both fascinating and frightening. Because in that process, a man feels as if he is losing control. As if the walls are melting, boundaries dissolving. And for a moment, I and we merge. This is what Carl Jung called integration. But some men fear this feeling, because it is so deep, indifference is impossible. This relationship can be so strong that no matter how much the man runs, he returns. This return is not planned, it cannot be explained with the mind. Because the body remembers, the soul calls. Even if the woman is not in his consciousness, she continues to live in his unconscious. That is why some men cannot answer the question, why is she still on my mind? The answer, in Carl Jung's words, is this. That woman awakened his anima. In other words, the feminine voice in his soul, the compassion, the bond, the gentleness. And once awakened, it is not easy to silence that voice. Don't you think sometimes someone enters your life just to awaken you? But here there is also a dangerous aspect. If a man sees this relationship not as integration, but as possession, attachment turns into dependency. I cannot lose her, he says, she is mine. And at that point, love mixes with the shadow. Because this is no longer a relationship, it is a desire for control. At the other extreme is the man who denies the existence of the bond. He tells himself, it didn't matter, but cannot get her out of his mind at night. Carl Jung says, every suppressed emotion unfortunately returns. And a suppressed relationship, when it returns, is stronger. Don't you think that sometimes the ones we forget the most are the ones that stay the most inside us? For women, this awareness is very important. If a man keeps returning, it is not always a planned game. Sometimes, it is just that a part of his soul is still with you. And this is part of his inner journey. You cannot heal him, but you can free yourself by understanding. Seeing that bond and realizing what it gave you is the most mature form of love. Because sometimes loving means letting go. And that departure can help both of you grow. Do you think some bonds exist only for transformation and development? This third layer taught us this. Intimacy is never merely physical. It is the place where the chemistry of the soul meets the chemistry of the body. And this union is both sacred and frightening. It is sacred because it reminds us of wholeness. It is frightening because it hurts when that wholeness is lost. Carl Jung says, the search for unity is human destiny. That is why even if a man thinks he has forgotten a woman, he does not forget the relationship he had with her, he only suppresses it. And one day, an unexpected memory, a scent, a piece of music can revive that bond. Have you ever experienced such a moment? As if the past returned in an instant? Share in the comments, maybe it will touch the hearts of others too. If you have listened this far, it is clear that these deep topics also touch your heart. Then don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Because in the next chapter, we will move to the fourth layer. The battle between fear and love. There, we will discuss why men sometimes change emotionally from one day to the next. And what actually lies behind this imbalance. If you are ready, let's continue. Chapter 4, Layer 4, The Battle Between Fear and Love. Within the inner world of a man, even during the process of intimacy, there is an ongoing battle, the battle between fear and love. On one side, there is the happiness love brings, surrender, and the desire to form a bond. On the other side, there is the anxiety of losing control and the fear of becoming dependent. When a man truly feels attached to a woman, he often oscillates between these two opposing feelings. Part of him wants to stay, part of him wants to run. This is why some men suddenly distance themselves at the moments they feel the most intense emotions. Do you think this escape is really from the woman, or from his own feelings? According to Carl Jung, this inner battle is the tension between the hero and the lover archetypes. The hero wants to be free, to embark on adventures. The lover wants to form a connection, deepen it, and belong somewhere. And the man swings between these two voices. On one hand, he thinks, love is safe. On the other, he worries, love will weaken me. At that moment, the language of the heart and the voice of the mind become intertwined. Have you noticed that some men experience love and fear in the same sentence? For a man, intimacy is often the deepest mirror. Because in that moment, he becomes aware of who he is, what he feels, and how open he can be. And if there are past pains within him, such as rejection, abandonment, or feelings of inadequacy, all of these surface during that period. Consciously he may say, I'm just in a relationship. But the unconscious whispers, what if I get hurt again? This is why a touch sometimes turns into love, and sometimes into anxiety. During these moments, a man can feel like a child, both curious and vulnerable. Don't you think that sometimes even the strongest-looking men still have a frightened child inside? Anxiety is love's quietest enemy. Because love wants closeness, and anxiety wants withdrawal. When a man opens his heart, he feels vulnerable. But love develops precisely in that vulnerability. Carl Jung says, true love is measured not by strength, but by vulnerability. In other words, love does not occur behind a wall, but where that wall is broken. But if that wall has been built over years with anxiety, it is not easy to break. This is why some men distance themselves as they love, and come closer as they worry. What do you think is the way to break this spiral? The biggest illusion of anxiety is thinking it protects me. But most of the time, anxiety deprives us of the most beautiful places of love. If a man has been cheated on in the past, or emotionally hurt, he unconsciously builds defense mechanisms to avoid opening his heart fully again. For example, he may make a joke to lighten the feeling. Or say, I don't want anything serious, to prevent depth. But beneath those words, there is usually one sentence. What if I get broken again? Have you experienced this feeling? Maybe you have it too. Balancing fear and love in intimacy is a man's greatest spiritual experience. Because when that balance is achieved, defense is no longer necessary. Love becomes not just a feeling, but a state of being. It is no longer about running away or possessing, but about staying together. As Carl Jung said, beyond fear, there is love, beyond love, there is freedom. This is why true connection is established only when facing fear. And in that moment, a man truly grows. Don't you think love is the bravest state of a person? Some men turn this fear into anger without realizing it. To avoid being broken, they become aggressive, numb, or distant. But deep down, they want to be loved. This contradiction exhausts both men and their partners. The woman thinks, I don't understand what he wants. While the man thinks, I don't understand either. But the point is not to understand, it is to allow feeling. When a man stays with his emotions instead of suppressing them, fear ceases to be an enemy and becomes a guide. And that guide leads him to true love. Do you think staying with emotions is weakness or strength? For a woman, this awareness is also important. A man's fear is not personal rejection, it is often an echo from the past. Therefore, understanding aims not to solve, but to stay beside him. A man deserves to be loved even when afraid. And sometimes just saying, I am here, is the greatest healing for him. Because love is more patient than anxiety. And patience slowly uncovers the mask of fear. Don't you think sometimes just being silent is the greatest support? This fourth layer teaches us. True love is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to stay despite fear. When a man realizes this, there is no need to fight anymore. He understands that surrendering to love is not vulnerability, but the greatest strength. And then, the language of anxiety is silenced, and the voice of the heart is heard. This awareness transforms both the man and the woman. Because love truly begins when freed from fear. And in that moment, two people connect not only with each other, but with life. Don't you think love is the greatest courage? If you have listened this far, it is clear these deep topics affect you as much as they do me. Then don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because the next chapter may be the deepest. Chapter 5, Spiritual Awakening and Integration. We will discuss where this entire journey leads, and how the essence of man and woman originates from the same place. If you are ready, let's move there together. Chapter 5. Layer 5, Identity and Being, Spiritual Awakening and Integration. Throughout ancient times, the meaning of intimacy for men has constantly changed. In the past, masculinity was measured by strength, lineage, and inheritance. A man would fight, create, and possess to prove who he was. Intimacy in those times was often merely a duty, more responsibility than feeling. But now, the world has changed. The modern man is tested not only by his strength but also by his emotions. Intimacy has become his mirror. So what do men see in this mirror? For men in today's society, it is no longer just about saying, "I am a man." It is about honestly answering the question, "Who am I?" Because when a man is truly close to a woman, that question naturally arises. Am I attentive enough? Am I really here? This is where the persona, the mask Jung spoke of, is tested. A man wants to appear confident, but deep down he feels, "What if I'm not brave enough?" These questions are silent but intense. At that moment, the woman's attitude determines the mirror within him. Don't you think sometimes a look, a touch, says more than 1,000 words? As Carl Jung said, awareness is the foundation of true intimacy. If a man is truly present in that moment and feels it, he does not only experience physical union, he rediscovers himself. But this state of being there is not easy. Because a touch, a breath, or a silence can make him feel either loved or inadequate. That is why a woman's presence at that moment carries far deeper meaning than expected. Do you think at that moment only bodies unite, or do souls also reach each other? When a woman expresses her love, a change occurs in a man's identity. Because that love activates the feminine soul within him, the anima. In that moment, a man does not only feel loved, he feels like a whole human being. However, if the woman withdraws or appears indifferent, that fragile side immediately retreats. Old fears arise, "I'm not good enough. I will be abandoned again." This is where Jung's shadow appears. Intimacy either heals or opens the wounds of the past. Do you think a touch can sometimes be as effective as therapy? In the past, men learned to suppress these feelings. Men don't cry. Men can't be emotional. Men must appear strong. But now we know that hiding emotions is not weakness, it is distancing from oneself. The modern man is now evaluated not just by performance, but by his presence. It is not how good he is in the woman's eyes, but how real he is that matters. Do you think it is harder for men to be real or to be strong? Small details after intimacy, a smile, a touch, a thank you, can be much more powerful than expected. Because in that moment, the man receives this message, "I am not only wanted, I am also accepted." This feeling of acceptance restores his identity. However, if there is silence or coldness, the voice saying, "I'm not enough" again, returns. During this process, the woman unconsciously becomes a mirror. In that mirror, the man either feels whole or incomplete. Don't you think sometimes the deepest feelings are experienced in the quietest moments? This is why Jung's teaching of balance is so important. If a man ties his identity completely to the woman's eyes, he loses himself. But if he ignores her entirely, he loses the ability to form connection. True maturity is about balancing these two extremes. Neither fully dependent nor fully detached, together yet free, close yet individual. Do you think it is truly possible to achieve this balance? And here lies the most beautiful point of the journey: integration. When a man faces his fears, removes his mask, and is truly present, love ceases to be a performance. When he says, "I am enough," he is speaking not to the woman, but to his own heart. And in that moment, he truly exists. Don't you think the most valuable bond begins when two people are honest with themselves, not just each other? For a woman, this awareness is also transformative. Seeing a man's vulnerability does not make him weak, it makes him human. And love that comes from that human place creates much deeper connection. There is no winner or right in the relationship anymore. There are only two people, one carries the shadow, the other the light. And together, they become whole. Don't you think true love is not about two halves coming together, but two wholes holding hands? This fifth layer tells us intimacy is not only the transformation of bodies, but also of identities. When a man recognizes his fear, love, and vulnerability during this process, he no longer experiences division within himself. Then he is not the masked man. He becomes the whole man. And that wholeness touches both the woman and life. As Jung said, to become conscious is to take your destiny into your own hands. And perhaps the greatest destiny is learning to love. What do you think? Is love a transformative power, or a mirror? If you have listened this far, we have truly embarked on a deep journey together. This story is not only about men, it is all of our story. So if these words stirred something in you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because perhaps in the next video, we will discuss your story. Remember, intimacy is not about two bodies, but about two souls awakening each other. And sometimes, a word, a touch, a moment, can change an entire life.